Around the release of Armored Core in July of 1997, the console mech game market wasn't very extensive. If we look back before the PSX, there is Front Mission on the SNES, which is probably the most appealing mech title on that console. With a great aesthetic and customizable robots, Front Mission 2 follows up in its footsteps and brings tactical mecha combat to the PSX, 2 months after the release of Armored Core. Similarly, Ghost in the Shell released a week after AC, and I wouldn't even consider it a proper mech game. If your definition is shooting things in a robot, then maybe, but it's much more of a fun, arcadey shooter with no customization. The cute spider robot is more of a vehicle to deliver fast-paced movement and combat, rather than to appeal to the mecha audience. Front Mission as well doesn't fall in line with Armored Core, with it being a tactical RPG. However, there is one mech-based game that released on the PSX before Armored Core that is actually an action game and allows you to change your mech.
We are Clan Wolf, children of Kerensky. We carry the honor of his name on our shoulders as our fathers did before.
It's terrible.
But Mech Warrior 2 is at least an example of the market that Armored Core was tapping into, a niche brimming with untouched potential, especially for consoles, to elevate the mecha genre and deliver a game with true depth and player freedom, immersive gameplay, and at least a decent story to tie it all together. Needless to say, Armored Core was a big hit. From Software may not have pioneered the genre, but have certainly cemented themselves as a leading figure in the action mecha scene, with possibly the longest continually running franchise, spanning across 16 entries and various spin-offs of other IPs. Not even Kingsfield lasted past the PS2, but Armored Core is still going strong even today with AC6. Who knew when From Software released their humble 4th game just what they set themselves up for in the future? The world is in ruins, humanity driven underground by the great destruction onset by warring nations long lost to the erosion of time. Over the course of 50 years, technology has evolved to better suit the harsh subsurface living conditions, developing beyond simply enhancing the human body. The muscle tracer technology gradually developed into full-blown piloted mechs, now known as cores. The companies that manufacture and distribute these MTs ultimately control the populace in place of any government. Chrome and Murakumo remain at the top of society, waging constant proxy battles and minor disputes in an endless vie for greater power, selling out their cities and civilians to edge out the competition. You are here to facilitate those transactions. As a raven of the nest, you take up contracts for any dealing, as long as the price is paid. Ravens are the scariest thing you can encounter on the battlefield. A one-man army with no allegiances, not even to their fellow mercenaries, piloting heavily modified and well-equipped MTs designed for any situation, also known as armored cores. It only makes sense that a large portion of Armored Core is, well, about the armored cores. You'll be spending a good amount of your time focusing on your mech and optimizing it as precisely as you desire. Unlike Front Mission, where your customization options are pretty standard, body, arms, legs, front and back weapons, Armored Core expands on this with even more options. Your choice of generator, firing control system, boosters. Your arm weapons are split between guns and laser swords, while back weapons are a wide range of rockets, mines, chain guns, and high-powered laser rifles. There are even option parts that only modify your stats, not affecting the main core at all. That's not to say Front Mission has low amounts of customizability. I haven't played it enough to confidently say that, but Armored Core has vast amounts of part options and variety in how you can tune your mech, much more than its contemporaries at the time. Take Mech Warrior 2 again, for instance, the only game most like Armored Core before its release. That only allows you to select from around a dozen preset mechs, whereas there could be thousands of different AC setups even when taking a conservative estimate. If you include every single small part as a different variation, we're talking drastically larger numbers. Even categories like legs make way for a wealth of options. Not just lightweight or tanky legs, how about your lower torso is literally a tank? Would you like to skate around the arena with spidery limbs? Would you like your arms to be rocket launchers or chain guns? Or would you like to be a speedy lightweight with wide sweeping weapons? The true limits of your build in Armored Core is your ability to juggle the billion stat numbers and your patience to test parts that may or may not be utter trash. Weight is a huge factor in any build, so is the maximum energy output of your generator. All of your parts rely on these two attributes, while AP, defense, and speed are also crucial to pay attention to. You could sacrifice movement entirely for firepower, nearly maxing your weight and energy, but you'll be a sitting target for any opponent. Alternatively, you can make a bare bones AC with excellent speed, but your weight limit might not be able to accommodate for any powerful weapons. Building armored cores is a balancing act of all 5 statistics, and you'll need to learn which is the most important to your playstyle as a Raven, otherwise you'll get swallowed up by fire out there.
Defenses damaged.
Missions are the other core aspect of the game. You'll be accepting typically one out of a couple contracts each round, all from different companies or agencies. Usually these missions don't go away until you complete them or fail multiple in a row and pass up the opportunity. Occasionally you'll have a choice between 2 opposing sides for a similar mission, which makes it pretty self-explanatory as to why the other disappears. Missions start out pretty simple, and no 2 are completely identical. You'll always have a unique objective that ranges from destroying specific targets, breaking in or out of facilities, sabotaging corporate structures, or protecting important cargo. It may sound simplified, but each mission really does feel different, not only from the varying environments they take place in, but the differing enemies you face, and the fact that sometimes contracts veer off course into unsuspecting territory or go horribly awry. And when things go completely south, you'll understand why being a mercenary sucks. See, contracts pay out a set amount, but if you fail them, you obviously don't get any money. The game doesn't reset, however, and you're left in debt as you have to front the repair and ammo costs of the mission you failed. At this point, you could just reload, but there is reasons why you might not want to do that, as we'll get into much later. My point is, making money in Armored Core is hard. Very hard, especially as a new player. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. This game unsurprisingly controls terribly. The same Kingsfield control scheme feels doubly uncomfortable in a third-person perspective, making even the training mission hard. Thankfully afterwards, though, you can change all the button inputs to your liking. However, your AC is still slow and clunky. There are weird movement quirks to get used to, like stooping after landing, getting awkwardly stunned mid-walk from lasers and being unable to move, and the ungodly slow turning speed that makes it difficult to keep up with the fast-flying enemy ACs. It all takes time to get used to, and throughout that entire learning process you're bleeding money, prolonging the time you spend in the stunted phase, unable to really match your opponents until you can upgrade your weapons or movement. After you get the hang of things and make some improvements, however, you'll understand why being a Raven is fucking awesome, actually. Going toe-to-toe with an enemy AC is always an invigorating, intense fight. Being able to keep up with enemies and dodge all of their attacks or take them down swiftly is a satisfying development from previously getting bombarded by basic MTs. Flying at top speeds, strafing past overwhelming fire, gunning down robots, or being deadlocked in a matchup against another Raven is the peak of Armored Core gameplay. And once you get past the initial slump, you'll be able to feel the constant rush of its encounters without the aggravation of going bankrupt. If you're feeling extra quirky, you could even try out the first-person mode, which I only stumbled upon randomly from a PlayStation demo disc. If you hold square and triangle, then pause, while not pressing any other buttons or moving, then unpause as you let go, you'll be shifted to first-person mode. It's mostly a cool novelty, and you do have more vertical viewing range, but this also makes it much harder to keep up with the fast strafing battles and narrows your lock-on range further, overall making fast-paced combat more difficult, but greatly benefiting situations where precision is necessary. As a new Raven, the awkward learning curve is hard to get out of even if you know what you're doing. After learning the controls, you still have to figure out how to upgrade your core efficiently, since it's pretty trash starting out. If you find yourself struggling to survive in missions, I recommend focusing on your legs and main weapon first, avoiding damage to subvert as much repair costs as possible, and picking an efficient weapon will allow you to save up for more substantial upgrades. The economy isn't completely user-unfriendly, since parts do sell for market value, costing you no extra money if you end up disliking a particular piece. This also allows you to sell the starting parts on your AC even while they're equipped, as long as you have a suitable replacement before starting another mission, helping boost the budget for acquiring those pricey upgrades. For legs, I personally enjoy the fastest humanoid variants or the four-legged archetype you unlock later. You could go slow and tanky, but I feel the extra repair costs you'll suffer outweigh the benefits. Plus, some later missions require good movement that seem extra difficult on a heavy build. For a lightweight design, you'll need to make some sacrifices in the amount of firepower you bring. Thankfully, the heavier weapons are more expensive to fire anyways, so if you're looking to be as money efficient as possible, purchasing a rapid-fire, low-cost SMG or the 1000 ammo assault rifle are some of your best options in balancing power with efficiency. Especially in AC to AC combat, rapid-fire weapons perform a lot better than single-fire ones, as the AI is typically fast enough to dodge most missiles or single projectiles, but shooting out 5 rounds per second makes that a lot more difficult. On my first playthrough, I went the opposite route and opted for a slow, single-fire gun to try and save money by rationing out my ammo. I found this to be much more miserable to use. Battles last longer, which inevitably lead to taking more hits, transferring to higher repair costs, and the ammo is much pricier anyways, basically stomping out any savings one could make. Now, you could still try out the heavy-hitting expensive weapons if you have nothing to lose, and I do recommend to experiment and discover what best suits you as a Raven. Massive explosive rifles and other absurd weapons are still fun to use, but they aren't as versatile for every situation like the SMGs or chain guns. In the late game, you unlock energy weapons that have zero ammo cost and only utilize your energy. All of the ones I've tried are incredibly powerful, although needing to be rationed out effectively. These weapons pair excessive firepower with peak money efficiency, and some of them are flat out busted like the SMG or hidden laser rifle that melts everything in existence. Customizing your AC is more than just min-maxing stats. It's just as much about the aesthetics as well. Creating a unique look is the player's only form of self-expression, going as far as allowing cool custom emblems to complete a unique build. Every part in Armored Core is modeled and represented on your mech itself, minus the internals that wouldn't be visible anyways. This leaves the head, arms, core, and legs as the central focus of your core's design. Every piece meshes well with most others. The mech parts themselves are designed with modularity in mind, but this doesn't take any personality out of a build. Effectively, half of Armored Core's visual budget is put into its mechs, so of course they look good, and there's greater room for the player to enhance those designs with custom paint jobs and mixing parts. Just take a look at the Raven leaderboards and you can see the developers put a lot of effort into making each one look unique. All of the same tools are left in your hands to create equally badass mechs that not only feel great to play, but look the part too. Personally, I love the leaderboard system as it gives a sense of a world outside of what you experience. Other Ravens are completing missions and making a name for themselves just as much as you. It's one of these subtle bits of world building that goes a long way when the game is pretty bare bones in its writing. This feeling goes even further when you actually encounter some of these threatening and top-ranking Ravens during certain missions, typically when they want to kill you. These are the best fights in the game, hands down. As I've said already, the tension of an encroaching enemy AC and the rush of the preceding fast-paced fight is invigorating, amplified by the fact that you know your opponents and vaguely what they're capable of. One may have shredded you in an earlier mission. This is your chance to interact with the world beyond your perception and prove yourself amongst Ravens.
Battle over.
The world we can see is typically mechanical bunkers, underground cities, within factories, and the occasional surface incursion despite it being seemingly uninhabitable. I presume the mechs allow humans to get around easier and withstand the harsh radioactive fallout, but it's hard to believe the world is a wasteland when all the surface missions are beautiful to behold. The underground missions do a great service to the world building and selling a sense of dystopia, especially from the dark, barren cities devoid of any perceptible life. life, or eerie rundown bunkers that become labyrinths of concrete and mechanical hums. The interior or subsurface maps are aesthetically nothing really special. They have a good level of detail, and almost every mission takes place in a different area, so there's no repetition either. But due to the nature of having no skybox or discernible architecture, a good dozen or so maps don't stand out from one another either. However, this environment is where the game's lighting thrives. From ambient streetlight that gives some comfort in your industrial crypt, to witnessing laser beams and explosions illuminate dark hallways or ACs themselves. The lighting is a nice subtle addition to Armored Core that gives a greater sense of realism to all the environments you explore, adding contrast and depth to complement the fine details of each map. Much more visually immersive than the early Kingsfield entries that came before it, which had little to no intricate lighting that makes the world look flat in comparison. What does look strikingly beautiful over the underground levels is practically any surface mission. From Software at this point hadn't experimented much with overworlds and skyboxes in their games. Kingsfield 1 took place entirely underground, 2 had rare moments where you could see the sky that was essentially a flat color, and 3 not only consists of about half overworld exploration, but gradient skyboxes as well. However, I think they truly nailed it with Armored Core, as most missions have a beautiful display of color, distant mountains and landmarks, and even nighttime maps present a full sky of stars, albeit less detailed than its day counterparts. A few levels stand above the rest with a vibrant sunset washed with a gorgeous purple sky, or an amber dusk, accentuating the vast, tragic, yet beautiful, lifeless wasteland. While the music of Armored Core doesn't quite portray the same sense of dystopia or melancholy, it does mesh quite well with the industrial environments and fast-paced action with its metallic D&B, robotic sound samples, and ambient background instrumentals to mimic the howling winds of the scorched earth. These armored breaks feel like they'd come directly out of the internal speakers of your core, with how at home they feel with the setting. It perfectly punctuates any encounter with its high energetic rhythm, especially when it comes to AC combat, which have the best songs out of the soundtrack. There are missions devoid of music, usually to emphasize a more serious or simple job, building tension in the former until a threatening opponent suddenly approaches, wherein the audio would promptly kick in for a sufficiently badass fight. For areas without music, this typically draws forth subtle ambience that can easily get drowned out. Large industrial fans, the whirring of your AC's engine, mechanical hums reverberating throughout an industrial tunnel. Armored Core may not have much ambience to fill in the void of silence, but its overall sound design, in tandem with its soundtrack, are much more involved compared to the Kingsfield series once again. Those games had a decent amount of sound effects, almost no ambience, and generally slapped one overarching area track with little variation. However, Armored Core steps up the game by constantly shifting its music between missions, dynamically removing or introducing a killer track during key moments to elevate cinematic events mid-gameplay. A majority of story developments are made this way, the rest revolving around contract briefings and emails, since Armored Core has very few cutscenes. At the beginning of the game, our Raven knows a little about the world, nor are they paid to, but as time progresses, a deep conflict between Megacorp's Chrome and Murakumo makes itself known. Contracts that once began as defending public safety pivot to proxy battles against suspiciously well-funded terrorist groups, eventually turning into blatant direct attacks between the companies that the Raven must decide between. All our external information is delivered via email, from companies or an internal Nest agent. This is the game's other major form of world building, and mostly offers cursory information about groups you fought or sided with, prompting the player to speculate and uncover secrets themselves. From dealings with each company and the extra information offered by our contact, Chrome is known as the more militaristic and hostile group, being directly confrontational with no attempts to hide their intentions, often contracting for the destruction of Murakumo bases and halting their operations through brute force. Murakumo, however, has powerful technology on its side, often respected by Ravens due to their manufacturing of advanced and top-line parts. Murakumo outwardly detests Chrome over its hunger for complete control, but use that as a front to mask their own insidious activities. Keep in mind, this story segment will host many spoilers of some of the best encounters and story beats of Armored Core. If you like what you've seen so far and haven't played the game yet, I encourage you to skip to the free play segment or jump right into the game now. Siding with either group is as simple as completing more of their contracts over their competitors. After working with Murakumo for a while, they send a contract to take down a Human Plus escapee. The Human Plus program is controlled by Murakumo, in which a person or Raven can undergo a dangerous procedure, melding their body with technology and steel, adapting their form to better interface with armored cores, thus enhancing their performance and combat capabilities. Some top-ranking Ravens are well-known Plus pilots, even the number one Raven, Nineball. However, this program can lead to an agonizing death, or the participant to lose their sanity, such as what we see in this mission. However, upon defeat he seems quite normal, and even tries to warn us that creating an intriguing mystery as to what lies below Murakumo. We can eventually undertake a mission from Chrome to delve into an old war research facility, one that supposedly worked on the Human Plus program, despite Murakumo marketing it as their own tech, and the facility is disturbing. This is clearly more than an abandoned research facility. It's a tomb of trapped spirits and dark secrets that deserve to be buried with the past. This is the most decrepit and creepy structure in the entire game, with clusters of unknown containers that possibly housed unfortunate test subjects, and an eerie intercom message looping from centuries long past, when bombs fell upon the vibrant Earth. Whatever the Human Plus program was, it should have been left dormant. Murakumo has awakened an existentially dangerous tool. Maybe its subjects going insane is intentional. Maybe the escapee was deemed a failure because he didn't mesh with the intended outcome of the procedure and needed to be eliminated. If you recall the debt mechanics from earlier, reaching a total of negative 50,000 credits doesn't actually result in a game over. Instead, you'll be taken in as a Human Plus subject against your will, coming out the other side with a new name, all your old AC parts and configurations, mission progress set back to stage 1, and some strange new abilities. Now, I did spend time going into debt to test out all the Human Plus features, but it doesn't work in free play, and I don't have a fully kitted out AC, so some of this information relies on the Wikia page. The most identifiable Plus feature is the detailed radar that supersedes whatever you have equipped. I don't find it too useful, but it does look rather cool. Upgrades are received from the program one at a time, so you have to go into debt more than once. Other upgrades include enhanced booster capabilities. The wiki says it just halves energy consumption, but boosting also feels noticeably faster than normal. Same goes for the lock-on system, but in both cases it could be placebo. One of the coolest enhancements is a Kingsfield-like blade wave that makes your melee weapon into a versatile infinite energy weapon. Normally, on a regular AC, you can't fire shoulder-mounted guns without crouching, unless you are using quad legs or tank treads. With Human Plus, you can not only fire them regularly, but while midair as well, which is impossible regardless of your legs. And finally, supposedly the ability to max your AC's equipment load with no repercussions. But after going into death 3 more times with no noticeable change, and the vagueness of this list that doesn't quite specify what feature pertains to each game, I'm unsure if this is actually a mechanic in Armored Core 1, and I didn't want to play the game a third time in its entirety to find out. The Human Plus program is really cool, and quite dark given its story implications, but it also makes the harsh economy of Armored Core more manageable, especially if you're trying to do a non-save scumming playthrough, or want to stock up on as many parts as possible and clear through the early game in a maxed AC. The enhanced booster speed and blade wave are so good that it's a shame you can't acquire these upgrades any other way after beating the game, as I would have loved to use them on my endgame builds. Continuing to side with Chrome leads to them gradually becoming the force of good almost solely due to Murakumo's rising corruption. Not only the Human Plus experiments, as Murakumo has acquired more old-world technology and weapons that make them a threat to all of humanity in their attempt to seize ultimate control. Our Raven is first sent to sabotage their spaceship, which inevitably fails when Murakumo sends out enemy space fighters that would get us utterly killed. Chrome doubles down with her own MTs to raid the base and successfully destroy it from the inside, followed up by our Raven overloading the reactors of a Murakumo moon facility that has unknown but still questionably dangerous purposes. Finally, Murakumo gets desperate and reveals the ace up their sleeve, an intergalactic laser utilized in the Great Destruction that threatens to wipe out all of humanity in another devastating blast it may not be able to recover from. With minutes to spare, Chrome blasts our Raven into the depths of space to prevent another world-ending cataclysm. It's an incredibly chaotic and violent mission with swarms of enemies, projectiles, and explosions constantly pelting the player as they're forced to focus on energy barriers and generators with narrow pockets between the grand weapon. But the lives and future of humanity are at stake. Murakumo can't get away with this short-sighted power play. The world is counting on you, Raven. Upon imploding Murakumo's last resort, a cutscene is played, depicting a CEO, presumably Murakumo's, being brutally executed in his own office. Holy shit! With such a shocking escalation from Chrome's competitor, they reevaluate. Murakumo's assets are redistributed, and Chrome ends up dissolving as well to hopefully help create a future of peace without the monopolistic reign of Megacorps. Siding with Murakumo leads to a drastically different timeline, with their ethically questionable actions being easily overshadowed by Chrome's ramping hostility and accompanying social unrest it builds. After one too many failed operations, Chrome goes over the edge and attempts a full-on coup at Murakumo HQ, attempting to establish itself as the oligarch of the ruined Earth with its fanatical supporters and militant terrorist groups. This is where Murakumo deploys its greatest weapon, us, to squash the dissent and put an end to their stewing rage. Down a massive silo into the heart of Chrome's base of operations, forced to crawl up its asymmetrical rusted intestines, swarmed with corporate rats. The battle is harsh through a massive array of Chrome MTs and projectiles, but after a steady sweep, we're finally able to see the blissful evening sky after a mission well done.
Raven, help me! Monster!
Until one of the most badass encounters in the entire game is dropped directly onto the player, the largest single enemy MT in all of Armored Core, Chrome's desperate final struggle for control and revenge after their many foiled plans. While this fight may not look as intense and fast-paced as the AC battles, the pure spectacle and size of this monstrous mech is enough to compensate for that. It's no pushover either. My inexperienced AC build could still take him down only after suffering heavy damages. It's the single best cinematic moment in Armored Core, fully selling the scale of Chrome's military power and making toppling the creature feel amply satisfying. What's even cooler is there were previous Chrome contracts the player likely accepted before this, as they're relatively easy and pay well, where Chrome tasks the Raven with testing a prototype combat MT for diagnostic data. If the player did end up doing this mission once or twice, this is likely the result of those easy credits coming back to bite them, with the hulking beast of steel being trained on the Raven's own combat data.
Target of operation cleared.
With the company's fall, a vacuum is quickly filled by yet another fledgling corporation, locking in competition with Murakumo yet again until its own inevitable decline. As the Chrome exec in the cutscene states,
So, nothing has changed after all.
Despite each story path splitting in opposite directions, the insatiable greed of each company still resulted in their own downfall, leading our Raven to clean up the remnants, which leaves only the final mission, Raven's Nest. The contract is supposedly from the Nest itself, tasking the Raven to clean up a band of mercenaries and the floating mines they left behind. However, this is merely a diversion from our true mission that not even the player fully grasps. Spending 20 minutes under constant enemy fire trying to blow up the mines leads to nothing, and after felling the unknown assailants, the Raven is thrust deeper into Raven's Nest, where an ominous robotic voice tells us,
"Stop such foolishness."
we cannot turn back now, no matter how desperately we want to, or despite the robot's pleas. This is the one part of the game I would honestly give up and go home, because it features the absolute worst mechanic in Armored Core, platforming, and forces the player to scale a ludicrously long tower filled with constantly moving cubes. It's already hard enough to platform accurately when you can barely see where you're going, but to top it all off, there are laser turrets and enemies that can knock you off and reset your progress all the way to the bottom. There are only a couple of platforming segments in Armored Core, not enough on their own to warrant complaints about, except for this unrelentingly frustrating segment that doesn't feel well built around Armored Core's movement system at all. It makes you wonder, what the hell is the Nest really hiding? Even after spending potentially 5+ minutes platforming horribly, the robot taunts us further, and our systems detect a new Raven in the vicinity. 9-Ball. This leads to a ruthless fight that could melt the player in seconds, swiftly resetting all of their progress made in the time-consuming platforming maze. Nineball shoots an absurdly powerful pulse rifle as if it were a full auto weapon, with a shoulder-mounted cannon for extra measure. This is by far the toughest fight in the game, and your only real respite is Nineball's tendency to not path well around the arena and actually chase you. Otherwise, the fight would be a harsh roadblock for even experienced Ravens. This also begs the question, why is he here? Possibly because we're raiding the Raven's Nest, but we still don't even know what we're doing here ourselves. And why is there a second Nineball deeper within the facility? Are either of them real? Hustler 1 is a notorious human plus, which means this is all connected to Murakumo's folly. Upon reaching the end of a series of massive shafts that require even more platforming, the Raven stumbles upon a massive computer labeled as the only target for the mission. Destroying it leads to a cutscene where an AI spouts about order and keeping peace in the world, which only leads to far more questioning. This ending and cutscene comes out of left field with little build-up behind it. There's barely any dialogue or other scenes in Armored Core that explain anything at all, so this ending stumped me for quite a while. What I speculate, with minor help from the wiki yet again, is that this is an AI that has been around from before the Great Destruction, possibly even designed to lead humanity after an apocalyptic event, but regardless, it's deeply tied to the Human Plus program, possibly even the result of a linked consciousness between all of its subjects melded with an AI. This is why Human Plus subjects lose their mind. They are being fused into a collective conscious and possibly overwritten as a husk for the Human Plus entity. The AI intends to keep order amongst the populace, even if it is a lie. Thus, it created ever-present conflict to keep people in check, likely creating Chrome and Murakumo to be locked in constant rivalry. It's already clearly had a part in Murakumo and the Raven's Nest, so it's not hard to believe the AI is secretly pulling the strings at Chrome as well. However, our Raven has been stirring up too much trouble, affecting the balance of the corporations and thus inadvertently escalating the rivalry to world-ending proportions, even causing the companies to dissolve and throwing the plan in disarray. When the Raven goes to mop up Chrome remnants, another Raven, Sledgehammer, ambushes us and states,
Don't you understand? You are totally out of line. You are going overboard.
Either Sledgehammer is a Human Plus or a devout Chrome supporter, but it's clear either way he's just a pawn in the 4D chess game that the Human Plus AI has organized. This type of conflict has apparently been ongoing and repeating for decades. The generation of rebirth of fake institutions, fake conflict, fake order. This is what our Raven puts an end to, making real change in the world and creating real peace, without new corporations springing up to fill the void of power left behind by Chrome and Murakumo. We were an outlier. The machine couldn't possibly predict the Raven's capabilities, and couldn't put a stop to him after it was too late, unless the player dies during the mission, that is, which promptly plays an assassinated cutscene, further driving home that a greater power beyond anything we've dealt with is behind it all. For a game that barely has any dialogue or cutscenes, tells most of its details through gameplay or external mail, Armored Core has a damn good story hidden between the lines. It just takes a lot of initial confusion to properly figure it out. I was pretty underwhelmed by its conclusion at first, but the more time and thought I gave to Armored Core, the more I grew to appreciate it. The game truly is a rough diamond that needs a little effort to polish. The subtext of Armored Core really carries the story and wraps everything nicely together into a satisfying conclusion, making it just as strong as, if not better than Kingsfield 3's narrative that mostly holds steady due to the lore buildup of Kingsfield 1 and 2. That's not to discredit Kingsfield 3, but while that game has a good upfront story, Armored Core forces the player to think and feels more fleshed out in all of its moving parts, divulging the story in a much subtler way that feels very gratifying to connect together. The game doesn't completely end with the final mission either, allowing the player to freely replay any mission or reach 100% completion and experience the contracts they missed out on from taking sides. You don't exactly feel the urgency and weight of the company's storylines this way, but it is still a nice option to gather all hidden parts on one character. There have been optional parts throughout various missions in the campaign that are typically either your best in slot or incredibly powerful in a specific niche, such as the incredibly strong laser laser rifle that appears more like a cannon, and hits like one too. However, it weighs 1,000 pounds and forces you to be nearly naked or a slow, hulking mass of steel. It's not good for every single mission with its low ammo count, but can melt nearly everything in the game regardless. There's even the Moonlight Sword hidden deep within a terrorist base that already felt like a Kingsfield-ass dungeon. It only feels fitting that FromSoft would put the Moonlight Sword in a game that gives it an optional sword beam, but makes the weapon's exclusion from Shadow Tower even more puzzling, as it fits that game far better than Armored Core. You can continue to use your prized AC in Versus mode, or even transfer your save data to the future 2 PSX titles, Project Phantasma and Master of Arena, so it's amply worth it spending the extra time exploring maps to acquire these powerful weapons. I was considering grouping all 3 PSX Armored Core titles together for one video, but judging how long this one has been, I think it's best to at least separate them into 2 distinct videos. But if Project Phantasma ends up being as interesting to talk about standalone as AC1 was, then I might make all 3 videos individually instead anyways. That is all for Armored Core 1 though. I ended up having a lot more to say about this game than I initially thought. As I said before, the more time and mental energy I put towards this game, the more it blossomed into a fantastic experience. Whereas I struggled in my first 4 hours to properly grasp the controls and not really understanding the appeal of the game, I'm now a fully fledged Armored Core fan, eagerly excited to cover the next titles, and I hope this video has encouraged you to try out the earliest and probably least accessible entry into the series, as it still has many redeeming qualities and enjoyment to be had under its rough exterior. Thank you for watching, Raven. And special thanks to members or patrons Shavanger, Mega Roomba, Zap, CL, and Luca.